How's it going, everyone? It is I, Anime Outlet, and this is part 4 of What If Deku Had a Perfect Copy Quirk. And now, let's begin. As soon as Izuku falls out of the portal, he's instantly injected with some sort of serum from a needle. As Izuku all of a sudden starts to just feel nothing, falling into a deep sleep, falling down straight onto his face, as the people standing around them would say, looks like you actually managed to catch him. That's quite good. Hopefully Shigaraki's proud of this. As Shigaraki would walk into the villain hideout, as he would see Izuku's limp body sitting on the floor. Good. That damn brat escaped us once. I'll make sure he's not gonna escape us again, Shigaraki would say, clenching his fist, as with the help of Shigaraki and some other people standing around, they would lift up Izuku and carry him into some sort of just blank sort of room that all there was an old hospital, just medical bed sitting in the middle of it, as they would flop Izuku down onto the bed as they would then leave. As after a couple minutes, a doctor would walk in wearing gloves, holding another needle in their hand. You escaped us once, Izuku. You actually managed to see me. I saw your quirk when it was just in the early stages, and now you'll become a villain. That's quite cool. I'll be working with possibly one of the most powerful people. I have my hands right now. I could change everything about you. I could turn you into anything. I could make you a Nomu. I could give you extra quirks if I wanted to. I could honestly do anything. You're so weak in this state. As the doctor clenching the needle in his hand, he would then look around Izuku's neck before putting the needle in it, as it would then a mysterious dark purplish liquid into Izuku. As a couple minutes would pass, as Shigaraki would walk in, as everything seemed normal and fine. However, after another minute or so, Izuku would all of a sudden rise, holding his head in pain. God damn it, what the hell makes my head hurt so much? As Izuku would look around before smiling, staring directly at the cyan-haired person standing right beside him. As Izuku would jump out of bed, leaping at Shigaraki, as his fingers would wrap around Shigaraki's neck, making sure his pinky wasn't touching Shigaraki. So, Shigaraki, we finally meet again. I know you're not the true leader of villains. You're just one of their underlings, of the true boss, but that doesn't matter right now, as Izuku, still clenching Shigaraki's neck, would knock Shigaraki out before lifting up the limp Shigaraki's body and tossing it over to the doctor. Hey, doctor, why don't you go ahead and make that Shigaraki into some sort of Nomu, will ya? His disintegration quirk would work quite well with it. As the doctor would nod his head, Izuku would then walk off. The doctor had just realized Izuku was now far more powerful than he had far thought that villainous serum would actually do. It had completely shifted Izuku's memories and had altered his perception to make him more of a villain. And now the doctor saw Izuku as way scarier, and since Izuku, as a hero, was afraid to kill anyone, he couldn't do it. However, as a villain, he could care less. He was constantly juggling life and death in his hands, as he just didn't care, and the doctor realized this, so he would decide to obey Izuku's word. As Izuku would walk into the bar, everyone would see Izuku sitting there, as they would just say, "Hush, Izuku, it appears you're finally back from your stay with the doctor." "Yeah, I am back. Although you might not be seeing Shigaraki for much longer as his normal self." "What do you mean?" Toga would ask, sitting on one of the couches right next to Izuku. "Well, I asked the doctor to make him into a Nomu. You know, the disintegration quirk really wasn't cutting out as a leader of this league, but it would cut out as a Nomu, rather, so I decided to make him into one." As all of the people sitting around would just say, "Huh? Wait, then who's the new leader of the league?" "Well, that would be me. Since I was able to defeat Shigaraki, that technically makes me the leader." As many people would just say, "Oh, well, I don't care. I mean, Shigaraki was sort of our friend, but he was also mean to us, so who cares?" He was kind of stupid anyways. He wasn't really the best of leaders, not staying cool and when you should be calm in a situation. So with Shigaraki now gone, Izuku was now the leader of the League of Villains. However, Izuku would start to think, I've heard about a villain named All for One. I possibly want to see who this could be. I wonder if he's any stronger than I am. As Izuku was thinking this, all of a sudden there would be a knock on the door right next to Izuku. He would look over, reaching down towards the handle, but would violently pull his hand back, knowing that he shouldn't open that door. All of a sudden, however, the door would be smashed in as Izuku would dive out of the way behind the bar behind Izuku. As there stood a shining golden figure standing there as he would then start laughing. "What have you done with Izuku?" he would yell, striking fear into the villains around them. However, they had done nothing to Izuku. He was all fine and well. Well, rather just the injection they had given Izuku to make him into a villain, that is. So Izuku would be sitting behind the bar thinking of his strategy as he would then look up at All Might before copying All Might's quirk. As All Might would see the green hair pop up from the bar as he would reach down to try to grab Izuku. However, before he could, his arm would be violently thrown backwards as he was now stumbling back. "Oh, so this is what your power feels like, All Might." What? Who the hell are... All Might would try to utter, however he couldn't. No words were able to be coming out of his mouth anymore as a punch would land directly into All Might's stomach, knocking the air out of him. "So much power! Is this how you feel every day, All Might? It's so good," as Izuku would be staring down at his fists. However, a gray, goopish-looking portal would start to open up as All for One would reach his hand out of it, grabbing on to one of the our stools, pulling it back or throwing it back into the portal. My, it appears that serum worked quite well for Izuku. It made you quite a bit stronger than your hero self really was. All Might would get up, still holding his stomach, before yelling, "All for One! What have you done? What have you done to Izuku?" As All for One would just laugh. "Oh, I've done nothing to Izuku. Well, a needle did something to him. I didn't. I didn't even touch it." As All Might would grab his hands down, clenching the earth beneath him, before projecting himself right at All for One, trying to grab All for One's face mask. However, he couldn't, being backhanded by All for One right into the bar, shattering glasses as little glass shards would end up falling down, hitting All Might's face and sticking into some of his skin, tearing his hero suit. As All Might would then get up before trying to rush at All for One once again. However, All for One wasn't talking. He just wasn't moving at all. As All Might would stop in his tracks as he would see a hand glowing with a mysterious aura right through All for One's stomach. As All for One would start to choke out words as his respirator around his head would start to malfunction. As Izuku would violently pull his hand back before laughing. "Oh, all this power. I guess this is quite good. I'll make sure to use it wisely." As Izuku would then backhand All for One, much like he had done to All Might, as All for One would start to fall down, his body now limp. He had completely been just dead from Izuku's blow to his stomach, as Izuku had completely shredded all of his organs, killing All for One instantly. As All Might would look on in pure horror as Izuku's hands and arms were now glowing. "I guess my copy quirk really needs something. With All for One's quirk and now One for All in my bank, I've made the perfect combination. All for All. I can do anything with this power, and no one's here to stop me." As All Might would rush towards Izuku, trying to stop him, pleading with Izuku to come back to the hero's side, that it's not... What have they done to you? He would continue on mumbling out random things. He was completely in shock. Here is one of his students he'd been training for months now, and he was one of the brightest students who had a great future. However, now all of that future had just been dissolved and disintegrated into nothingness. As Izuku stood there clenching his fists, just laughing. "Well, All Might, I guess you should possibly say Bye to your little students over there, as All Might would violently shake his head round and round looking for someone, as he would end up seeing some of his students cowering behind a wall, now looking at their former classmate, as they just weren't sure what had Izuku become, as Izuku would clinch the top of Might's head before bashing it into his knee. His blood would now flow freely down All Might's nose, as Izuku would then slam him down into the woods, shattering it, splintering off into All Might's face. As Izuku would then elbow All Might right in the neck, cracking it, leaving All Might completely paralyzed. As Izuku would then leave the limp All Might there to bleed out and suffer in pain, as Izuku would look over towards the classmates. All Might had decided to go off and find Izuku just on impulse, as they were actually had a plan to go save Izuku the night after the one that had just transpired. And with all the students, or some of the students that wanted to save Izuku, they saw All Might run off, and even heard him say that he was going to find Izuku, so that they would decide to follow him, and that's where they ended up. However, they didn't find Izuku. They only found a monster in a shell of what Izuku had once been, as Izuku would stare on towards his former classmates, as his eyes would glow a deep purple. "So, does anyone want to come at me first?" Bakugo would rush off, just glaring at Izuku. "What the hell have you become, Izuku? What's happened to you?" As Izuku would just laugh. "Oh, Bakugo, I guess out of all the people you wouldn't understand the most. I've become a better self than what I prior to this. Anyway, I guess I should take you all out now before you become an even bigger threat in the near future. It's only a wise decision." As Izuku would rush up towards Bakugo before grabbing his head, slamming it into the knee, as the now shocked Bakugo would fall down to his knees, just not sure. Here, stood in front of him, was his best friend. He had been training with Izuku for years, but now all of that had just been thrown out of the window, as Izuku was now just going to kill him. He couldn't comprehend it. They had always wanted to become heroes together, but now Izuku, one of the best people he'd ever met, one of the people that had trained with him, one who made him a better person, was now trying to kill him, devolved into a life of crime and villainy. He couldn't comprehend it at all. As Izuku would be standing above Bakugo, as Bakugo still sitting on his knees, as tears would start to flow out of his eyes, he couldn't comprehend it at all. Was insane, as Izuku would then smile. "Good. Since you're deciding not to fight, I'll give you a quick and painless death," as Izuku's hand, now glowing a bright purple, would then slash, as the head of Bakugo would topple over to the ground, as his body would then fall down limply to the floor. As a loud thump would be heard, as his classmates would look on in shock. Uraraka would now rush out, hugging Izuku, screaming at him, "What the hell has he done? What has he become?" Much like Bakugo had, as Izuku would just laugh. "Oh, Uraraka, I always had feelings for you, at least before a couple of hours ago. But now I see those were just foolish emotions that have just gotten my way of my true life's work." No. This can't be Izuku. "What the hell have you done with Izuku?" Uraraka would yell, as Izuku would start to laugh even further, as the laughs would echo, bouncing off of the buildings all surrounding Izuku and his former classmates. "Oh, Uraraka, if only you weren't so blind. Maybe I should help you with that," as Izuku would then plunge both of his fingers right into her eyes, as she would scream out in pain, completely terrified at what Izuku had become. She was now completely blind, much like Izuku had just said, as she would fall down to the floor, holding her eyes, still screaming in agony and pain, as Izuku would then start to laugh. "Well, since you're not putting up a fight like Bakugo, I might as well end your suffering and misery as well," as Izuku, raising up his arm, would then slash, as Uraraka's head would fall down to the floor once again, as now Todoroki, Mo, and Kaminari now rush out from behind the corner, all trying to take down Izuku. However, they were all stopped in an instant, as they would all be frozen, not able to move. as they were now dead as well, much like the two sitting on the floor beneath Izuku. As all of a sudden someone would come rushing out with the same green hair as Izuku. Izuku would look on to see that it was his very own mother, crying, yelling for Izuku to stop, as a spotlight would be placed on Izuku. It was a news helicopter, as it was now watching, recording Izuku's every move, even possibly listening in to what he was saying. As Izuku would stare directly on towards his mother, who was crying, beating on his chest, yelling for him to stop. As Izuku would stare down at her. "What do you want, mother?" Izuku would say in a cold, raspy voice. As she would continue on crying, now even harder. "Izuku, what have you become? You can't become a villain. You always wanted to become a hero. I always remember you screaming and yelling like you were going to become All Might one day. What happened to you?" Inka would say, as Izuku would only stare down towards his mother in a cold way. He couldn't think of anything. There his very own mother was. As Izuku would grab and grip onto Inko's back, before Inko, thinking Izuku had started to come over to her side, as all of a sudden she would feel a sharp pain right into her chest. "This is hard for me to say, Mom, but I think it's time for you to go." As Izuku would violently pull his arm back, as Inko would then fall down onto Izuku. Izuku would grab her limp body, as her eyes now cold and completely void of any emotion, as she had died as well, as Izuku would pick her up before laying her down on the ground gently, as Izuku would then walk off, walking into a portal after copying Kurogiri's Quirk, as he would then find himself in a Nomu warehouse where the rest of the League of Villains were watching the news, which happened to be what Izuku was on, as Izuku would sit there, the news reporting this, just saying many people were dead, as police would end up arriving on the scene, searching everywhere throughout the ruins of the buildings Izuku had collapsed. "Well, I guess we have ourselves a new boss, hey?" Dabi would say, looking around, as many of them would just sort of laugh, quite scared of what Izuku was. He had defeated All For One, someone who they were completely afraid of, one who could just snap his fingers and they would be dead in an instant. And Izuku had killed him in such an easy, calm way. They were completely frightened. They couldn't think of someone who could be this powerful. They knew now if they kept with Izuku, they would surely have power. And Izuku, if they were to wrong him, they knew he'd kill them. He had the power to do so. As Izuku would be sitting down on a box before thinking long and hard. He had just killed many of his closest friends and even his mother. He had killed All Might, the number one hero and All For One, possibly the number one villain in the area. Izuku just had to think for a moment. As Izuku was thinking this, the day would end up passing as Izuku would end up falling asleep. The next day, Izuku would wake up as the news were still just reporting on what Izuku had done, as they were even reporting on Izuku, asking if anyone had even seen Izuku, they need to report it to the police as possible. He's the most dangerous subject, or the most dangerous criminal in possibly the world. He had killed the number one hero, after all, on live television. Everyone saw it, watching the news that night, that Izuku had easily just killed All Might with the flick of his wrist. They just couldn't think that a villain could be so powerful. Their shining ray of hope had just been decimated by Izuku. And over the next couple of weeks, Izuku would slowly start to hunt down the top 50 heroes, completely killing them all off. As what the copy hero once was, had completely been disappeared. Many of the people had seen that all of the top 50 pro heroes had been completely killed besides Copycat, as many people would be yelling, asking, pleading for Copycat to come back and save them from this hell. However, he never came back, as Copycat had become the one they wanted him to save them from. As Izuku would go around killing his enemies, many of them heroes, he would even go to UA and completely destroy the school with the help of the League of Villains, planting devices, causing explosions, sending the towers of UA and the dormitories falling down, slamming into the people below them, as fires would rain along hard throughout the city, completely turning everything into ash and ruins of what they had once been, as casualties would rank high in the millions, as Izuku would go on a rampage, completely destroying all of the cities, as he would sit high on a throne, realizing that he had achieved everything. He had all this power. He now had no one who could possibly stop him. No hero was possibly strong enough to take him out. He destroyed all of those who had even tried to kill him. As Izuku would be sitting there, all of a sudden someone would smash through the door. It was a small-time villain agency or a villain hideout people and just a villain group that Izuku had neglected to do, as people now ranked in thousands of people would join Izuku's ranks, knowing if they couldn't beat him, they might as well join him, as Izuku would overthrow the country's government, now becoming the ruler, the emperor of the country they lived in. However, there was one person that could stop Izuku, and this just happened to be Overhaul. With now power of these bullets that couldn't possibly erase someone's quirk, Overhaul knew if he were to end this reign of terror, he would have to become a hero, something he truly despised, as Overhaul would end up joining through the ranks and passing up to Izuku, as finally, once he was close enough to Izuku, he would end up blindsiding him, putting the weapon up to his neck, telling Izuku that it's over. His reign of terror is now done for, as Izuku would just sort of laugh. Overhaul, I've seen you rise through the ranks. I what you've been trying to do all along. See, with power comes people trying to take that power from you. So they know it would be quite easy, as all they have to do is beat you, and now they're the ruler of that league. It's how I got my power. And so I knew people were going to try to betray me. I've had my very closest people here. They told me about these quirk-canceling, quirk-erasing bullets that you happen to made with the help of a young girl named Eri. Now I truly am a low-life villain who destroys and kills hundreds of people. But doing that to just a little girl, making her suffer, why didn't you just end her life and cleanly, making them so they're not devolved in a life of pain? That's what I would do. However, you made that little girl suffer, and so I'll make you suffer as well. As Izuku grabbed the gun in such a quick motion, pulling it around before aiming it right at Overhaul's forehead, pulling the trigger as it would then implant itself right into one. As he would fall backwards, he was now completely corkless, as the serum would end up flowing throughout Overhaul. As all of this was happening, Eri would be taken to Izuku, where he would then meet her. Over the next couple of years, Izuku would rule over the land that Izuku resided in, as many people tried and failed to take over what Izuku's empire had become. Izuku had stopped all of the villainy, as he knew that with an army, he didn't have to become such a villainous person. However, his legacy was that of villainy, as he had gotten all of his power through being a villain. And so Izuku would start to try to make up for that, doing other small things. He even adopted Eri, as she was now his child and his heir to the throne, as he would end up using All for One when Izuku was old and on his deathbed to give Eri his copy quirk, while also the knowledge of all the quirks that he had gotten, giving her the power of his emperorcy, as even giving her the heir to the throne, making her the new emperor. As all of this would be happening, the world would slowly grow to accept that the empire of Midoriya was now just another part of the world. They couldn't do anything to stop it, as no one had a powerful enough quirk to even be able to defeat the Midoriyas, being Izuku or Eri. And that is where this what if ends, with Izuku now reigning over his empire, as no one would be able to stop him until a new powerful quirk would end up arising either out of his empire or in it. However, that wouldn't happen for hundreds of years, and when the emperors and heirs would end up growing old and evil, with shady ways, as there's always going to be good emperors and bad ones. It's just a matter of time until each end up taking position in the role of power. And that is where this What If ends. I hope you all did enjoy this series, What If Deku Had a Perfect Copy Quirk. However, I know a lot of you guys don't really like dark endings too much, with everyone drooling and dying, everyone Izuku had known being dead in this What If, and now Izuku building up new friends in his ranks and empire. And so, there's going to be an alternate ending, one for the people that like the heroic endings. So, yeah. So yeah, I thank you all for watching once again, and goodbye.